So I read an article, right? I read an article on Box Talk Radio where Duke McKenzie said that Usyk is only in the top 20 of greatest heavyweights. I believe that was the context. They're talking about 20 greatest heavyweight fighters, and he says Usyk is in the top 20. Now, of course, a lot of people would debate this, and I think a lot of people would have Usyk in the top 5. I think some might include him in the top 3. But this, for me, prompted a question. And that question was, are there fighters outside of the top 20 that would have beaten Usyk? So to me, top 20 heavyweight fighters, you know, particularly top 10 heavyweight fighters are going to be, they're all going to be champions, isn't it? You know, you got Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis, George Foreman, Rocky Marciano. This is in no order, by the way. Larry Holmes. These are all champions. Yeah? I've got Vander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, all champions. All of them champions. And then you got your Jack Johnsons, you know, you got Jack Dempsey, etc. So there's those guys. And you can put those guys in like an elite category. Obviously, your Joe Frazier's as well. You can't forget that. But then you got people that are outside of that top 20. Would any of them have a chance in beating Usyk? And what's the case for that? And even if they did have a chance in beating Usyk, does that mean Usyk is only top 20? Does that not mean that he's top 10 and top 5? Okay. Well, who would be some of the contenders? And I just quickly put a list together, and I just included people that were in the 90s. So I didn't look at 70s, 80s. I just thought a quick list of people in the 90s. So I thought David Tua, he was a murderous puncher. That left hook was serious. Ray Mercer was a serious guy. He gave Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis 2 very, very hard fights. And some people thought he won both of those fights, by the way. You got Tommy Morrison. Again, Tommy Morrison had a phenomenal left hook. I believe I read that Lennox Lewis referred to Tommy Morrison as the hardest puncher he ever fought. Then you have Razor Ruddock. Again, Razor Ruddock had 2 great fights, or 2 good fights, grueling fights with Mike Tyson. Again, phenomenal left hook. And then we have Chris Bird. Now, Chris Bird's an interesting one because Chris Bird was a champion, arguably outside of the top 20, but he was very slippery. He had good combination, good foot speed, and he had the skills, and he was hard to hit. He was elusive. So, out of all those fighters, who would give Usyk a run for his money? So let's eliminate a few people. So I think David Tua would struggle immensely because of his foot speed. So even though he would have a puncher's chance, he definitely would have a puncher's chance. And if Usyk decided to just sit in front of him and have a fight, then that would be a very, very bad idea. But looking at Usyk's history and looking at his boxing intelligence and how he manages fighters, you would say that his movement, his boxing intelligence, his speed, his ability to adapt, the only chance you're giving David Tua there is a puncher's chance. And to look at how David Tua fares against good boxers, the Lennox Lewis fight is a good reference point. Now, there is some context. Lennox Lewis had a longer reach, much longer reach. So there is some context. But still, Lennox gave him the movement. He couldn't solve the puzzle. He really could not solve that puzzle. But David Tua's power is phenomenal. And like I said, if you stay close, bad things are likely to happen. Also, I would probably take out Tommy Morrison. Tommy Morrison, again, similar to David Tua, had a great left hook. He had a phenomenal performance against George Foreman. Still to this day, how did Tommy Morrison go 12 rounds with George Foreman, take his punches and not get knocked down? Let's put some context on this. Tommy Morrison is supposed to have a really bad chin. He's supposed to have really bad punch resistance. Yet he went 12 rounds with George Foreman and didn't go down once. That's phenomenal to me, but that's a side note. But I think that, again, you give him a puncher's chance, but Tommy Morrison showed the ability to adapt against George Foreman. I think that's a spectacular fight for him. And also when he beat Razor Ruddock, he showed composure in a moment of adversity to land that counter left hook. But I don't think, respectively, he has the boxing intelligence to compete with Usyk or be competitive with Usyk. He definitely would be a threat. And a prime Tommy Morrison, if you stand with Tommy Morrison, you will likely get knocked out. So assuming that Usyk is the Usyk that we know, I believe that he weathers the early storm, because there probably would be an early storm, and he would win the fight. But the first 5 rounds would be very interesting, because Tommy Morrison had power and he had speed. And like I said, Lennox Lewis made reference to that. I believe Ray Mercer also made reference to how hard Tommy Morrison hits. But I don't think Tommy Morrison would have been the guy to beat Usyk. I think Tommy Morrison is underrated. Like, he really, and not only is he underrated, it's like Tommy Morrison, he brought so much excitement to boxing. He brought so much excitement. You get some boxers that are successful and they have a load of wins, but for whatever reason, they just don't bring the excitement. Tommy Morrison brought the excitement. He was entertaining to watch. He was going for the knockout. He really was. And yeah, he's almost like what you would call a fan favorite. Definitely a fan favorite. But who I think would give Usyk a really good fight is Ray Mercer and Chris Bird. Now, when we talk about Ray Mercer, we have to clarify which Ray Mercer we're talking about. So you got like 2 Ray Mercer, or 3 different Ray Mercers. You got the Ray Mercer that fought Tommy Morrison. You got that Ray Mercer. You got the Ray Mercer that fought Larry Holmes, and then you got the Ray Mercer that fought Evander and Lennox Lewis. I think the one that gives Usyk problems is the one that fought Evander and Lennox Lewis. And I think the reason he gives him problems is because he's got really good punch resistance. He's a good pressure fighter. He'll cut off the ring. And he's got a really, really good work rate. He can put punches together, and yeah, I think that could give Usyk some serious problems. I feel like the work rate, and it also depends on what Usyk he's fighting. So I think the Usyk that punches really heavily, like the Usyk that fought Daniel Dubois, I feel that Usyk throws less punches, and I think that gives Ray Mercer a greater opportunity to win a points decision. I'm not saying he would, but I'm saying that there's a possibility that he could outwork Usyk. However, the Usyk that fought Tyson Fury and the Usyk that fought Anthony Joshua, I think it's a really good fight. Now remember, when he fought Evander Holyfield, he gave Evander Holyfield all the trouble he could handle. And I believe it was in round 8 when Evander Holyfield scored a knockdown with a left hook. I think it was a counter left hook, really short left hook. And that knockdown changed the dynamics of the fight. But he was really starting to, dictate the fight. It was a very competitive fight, but he was really putting his stamp on the fight and really showing the level or the quality that he had. And I remember when Ray Mercer fought Lennox Lewis, people kind of dismissed Ray Mercer's chances, and there was a small ring, but he gave Lennox Lewis all he could handle that night. I think Lennox Lewis might have said that was his toughest fight, and again, it was just the amount of punches he was throwing and the power and the accuracy, and he just wouldn't stop coming forward. And I think that type of Ray Mercer will give any heavyweight problems. So I think you got to give Ray Mercer a shout. That version of Ray Mercer, not the Ray Mercer that fought Larry Holmes, not that version. The version that fought Evander Holyfield and the version that fought Lennox Lewis. Chris Bird is another interesting fight. Why is it interesting? Well, Chris Bird's a southpaw, so he's going to have to deal with that southpaw jab. Well, they're both going to have to deal with each other's southpaw jab, and he's slick. Now, the Chris Bird fight would be a difficult fight, but it may not be an entertaining fight. But it would be like Chris Bird has high boxing intelligence, so that would be, that he would be trying to match him on that level. And Chris Bird is so elusive. He's hard to hit, so it would present a different challenge, a very different challenge to what he's faced so far in the heavyweight division. So I think those two fighters could potentially give Usyk a really good fight. Now, with regards to the question, is he only in the top 20? I respectfully disagree. I think he's higher than that. I think that he competes. I think based on his performances, he competes in any era. Now, the question is this era so poor that these fighters are just nowhere near the caliber of the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s? So you could make the argument that these fighters are, they're not on the level of the Evander Holyfields, the Riddick Bowes, the Lennox Lewises. You can make that argument, or you could say that they're not on the level of Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, etc. But how do you qualify that statement? It's really impossible to really qualify that statement. So based on the evidence that's presented, based on what he's done, you'd have to put him up there. You would have to put him up there, because all his performances so far within the heavyweight division have been cynical, and it's been, nothing is ever perfect, but it's been very close to perfection.